Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to talk about dog gear. So today we're specifically going to talk about doggy sleeping bags, and you might want to say, why do I need a doggy sleeping bag? Well, first off, they're made with different materials. So a lot of the material is going to be more weather or water resistant. It's going to be tougher against claws and nails and just going to stand up against outdoor elements a lot more than something like a simple $2.50 fleece blanket from Walmart. So what I'll be walking through today will be 3 different types of sleeping bags that I found online, 2 from smaller cottage vendors and 1 from a bigger name. So this is the Ruffwear Highlands Sleeping Bag. This is the Whyld River Sleeping Bag. This is the Wilderdog. And each of these have pros and cons about each one, but first I'll start talking about the specs and the price, then I'll go through packability, and then I will actually put them inside a couple of popular tents, the Copper Spur, the Nemo Dagger, the REI Half Dome 2, and then I'll talk through kind of the pros and cons of each one, and you guys will be able to make a better decision for yourself and for your dog when you're out camping. Oh man, need some coffee. Okay, so first we'll go through the Ruffwear Highlands Sleeping Bag. And this is one of the most popular sleeping bags out there. So if you do a Google search of doggy sleeping bags, it's usually the one that comes up first. Now, Ruffwear came out with a new version last year, which I got and had about a year to field test. This one, I have a lot of pros and a lot of cons, was able to test it out in the field. So I really have a good idea of if it's gonna be the right type of sleeping bag for you. So the size I have here today is the medium. Now, Ruffwear does have a large size, but I thought it was gonna be too large and too heavy for what I needed for Remy, so I went down to the medium, and it fits him pretty well and also fits into a standard medium-sized dog pack, which is one of the key things that I wanted out of the sleeping bag. The shell is a 75 denier polyester with a DWR finish, so definitely good when it comes to wet dog feet, when it comes to dirt, and being able to shed away hair very well. So we'll go ahead and open it up. And then the inner lining is a 40D water resistant, not durable, so not DWR, but just WR. And what's nice about that is that the actual hair does not get caught in the inside of the sleeping bag, and it's a little bit softer than the outside of the sleeping bag. It also has a half length zipper, which I will say is not quite half length, and when I go through some of the cons, I'll tell you why. They probably should design it to be a full half length, but I would say it's about a third length at this point in time, so your dog is able to actually get in to the sleeping bag like a human sleeping bag. It also comes with a pad sleeve on the bottom, which the pad is sold separately. So what you would do is just open up this pad and then insert it into the bottom. Also in the bottom there are elastic tie-out loops in case you wanted to stake this down, which I have never needed to do, so it's not really a key attribute for me is to have these. I would want the loops on the outside though to help hang it dry if I needed to. The bag also has a neck baffle, so when the sleeping bag is over the dog, it drapes over them a little bit better on their head. The shell is water resistant, but not waterproof, so just keep that in mind. It's not a waterproof, so it is meant to be used inside of a tent or used indoors, though you could throw it on the ground if you wanted to. I just wouldn't recommend it without the actual sleeping pad, which has a waterproof liner, but you do not want to put this outside on top of wet ground as it's in the sleeping bag, because the bottom of the pad will actually go in here, so you want it to stay on the outside. The dimensions of the medium size are 25.2 inches by 33.5 inches, and it comes in at 1 pound 10 ounces. And that is with the stuff sack, and actually it's a compression sack. And what's nice about this is that it is a 70D half done nylon, and it will compress down even further from the size of this compression sack, which is also a very nice feature. Now there's also only 1 color available, so if you're one to want different color options, you're gonna be out of luck. The only color available for this year model is gonna be this huckleberry blue. The total price for this sleeping bag is a whopping $99.95 plus tax and shipping to wherever you are. The sleeping pad is an extra $39.95, so total to pay for this entire sleep system would be $140. And the Ruffwear Highlands Sleeping Bag is also made in Vietnam, which is definitely one of the only doggy sleeping bags I found out there that is not made in China. So next, we're going to talk about the Wilderdog Sleeping Bag. Now this was a smaller company I found online through some Google searches. I believe Garage Grown Gear also has them listed as one of their smaller vendors, and I thought their sleeping bag actually looked very nice and durable and useful, so I decided to buy one and kind of test it out indoors. I haven't been able to take it out in the field, but I went through a kennel test and a puppy test, which mind you is a pretty good test of durability, just to see how the fabric would hold up, and also things around hair and shedding and just general walking on and ease of use with the sleeping bag. Let's go ahead and open it up. So the Wilderdog sleeping bag is nice because it actually comes in two different colors. So this is the olive green color, and the other color is more of a cranberry color. And they also have matching dog food bags and dog food bowls, which I did get the food bags, and I'll show in another video, to be able to match your sleeping bag if that is something that you would like to do. Now, what I did find really nice about this sleeping bag is that it actually looks like a sleeping bag. It only comes in one size, and it is rather large size, so it is one of the larger sleeping bags. And if you think about more of your traditional Coleman type sleeping bag, that is how it is. It's not really a stuffable, compressible sleeping bag. It kind of folds and rolls into its own stuff sack. But it does have some nice details on it with these hang loops, which have this nice embroidered pattern on it. And the zipper actually is a 3/4 length zipper, which is nice, Velcro, because you're able to open the sleeping bag all the way up. And so that is really important for someone who has a large dog, especially someone like Remy. And the biggest difference between this one and also the supposed half-length zipper that is on the Highlands sleeping bag, when your dog tries to get into the sleeping bag, especially on the Highlands sleeping bag, you kind of have to push them into the sleeping bag because it doesn't open up all the way. This is very nice because the sleeping bag opens up all the way and you can drape it over their body like a blanket. I did email Wilderdog and ask for the denier level of the outer, which actually feels really, really thick. I'm assuming it's about a 65 to 70 denier. They were not able to give me this spec, just said it was a durable fabric. On the website it says a polyester ripstop, and you can definitely tell it does feel very durable. This is one where I would actually feel comfortable putting it on the ground outside, but mostly meant to be an inside tent type sleeping bag. Now the inside is a soft, more fleece-like lining. The only downside I saw to that would be hair. Hair gets stuck definitely in it. You can't brush it off like you would a nylon or a polyester. So that is kind of the only downside that I saw with the inside of the sleeping bag, especially if your dog is wet, it's gonna absorb that moisture and not be able to dry out. But definitely if your dog likes soft interiors, this could be the sleeping bag for them. One thing about Wilderdog too is that for every purchase that you make, they will donate a pound of food to one of their local charities. If you want more information on that, go to their website, which I will link in the description below. And the Wilderdog sleeping bag does measure in at 36 inches by 28 inches. So it is a wide sleeping bag, so will probably fit better on larger or medium to large dogs. The Wilderdog sleeping bag also does not have a pad sleeve to be able to tuck the pad into the sleeping bag or keep it from falling. And that would be one of my major concerns on trail, is just Remy pushing the sleeping bag off, just because the outer part of the sleeping bag, since it is slippery, would slide off his sleeping pad. And the great thing about the Wilderdog sleeping bag, it is only $49. So for the features and what it entails and the overall packability of it, or I'll say travel ability of it, it's a very cheap sleeping bag compared to the other ones on market. Now the downside to the sleeping bag is because it isn't compressible or packable, it is a little bit bigger and doesn't quite fit in packs, and I'll show you in the video later. And it does come in at 1 pound 14 ounces, so it's on the heavier side of some of the sleeping bags, and it's also made in China. When it actually did come and arrive at my house with the food bags, it had this terrible plasticky smell, so I did have to air it out when it arrived at my house. And next up, we have the Whyld River Sleeping Bag. So the Whyld River Sleeping Bag is definitely the one where I think about if I'm taking my dog backpacking. It is soundly designed for that. So the founder is actually a backpacker and designed the sleeping bag for just that. And you can definitely tell how smart the design is and how it is meant for dogs who will be backpacking. Now the Whyld River Sleeping Bag does feel the most like a human sleeping bag. And you can definitely tell when you're trying to pack it up. It doesn't roll like these other dog sleeping bags and just gets put into the stuffed sack. You can actually stuff it into the stuffed sack, which I found very key when trying to get it into Remy's pack. And this is made with a 40D ripstop nylon all the way around, and also includes a sleeping pad. Now the sleeping pad has a combination of toggle and loops. And also snaps. Originally, the sleeping bag was designed just with the snaps, but she actually redesigned it because some of her customers were saying that the dog would get up and turn around and it would come unsnapped. So what the toggles do is help give it a little bit more room. The doggie, a little bit more room to move around, but also being able to stay on top like a sleeping bag. And the loop and toggles, they go all the way around the sleeping bag. So what's nice is that you can use it just like a normal bed, but then if you get into situations where it is below freezing or it's a little bit colder, you can unsnap or untoggle some of the ends and have it drape over them or have them crawl into it like a sleeping bag, and you still have the pad underneath. So there's several different ways to actually use this. Is that if your dog is just, I'll say a pretty tough dog, and you're just summer camping and you want just a simple sleeping pad, you can just take the sleeping pad. This is also nice probably just to throw around or outside of the tent in the vestibule, because I think it would be good for the dog to walk on before it gets in the tent and not have as muddy of a paws if you didn't want to bring it along. Or you can just leave it at home if you already have a pad and you just plan on using the bed part of it. On the bottom side of everything from a small to the extra large, there is a pad sleeve that's on the bottom. But what I did find is that the way that it's sewn, it doesn't extend all the way to the top. So you can't actually fit in a normal 20-inch sleeping pad like so into the pad sleeve. So for me, that part of it isn't really as functional as it should be, and I may just add some shock cord to be able to hook the sleeping pad into the sleeping bag. Now, the other thing that you can do is if it's snapped together, you can flip the top over and it acts as if it's a bed with some bolsters on it. And then when you flip it back over, like a sleeping bag, it adds as sort of a wind or heat baffle to be able to hold in that heat with the dog. The other cool thing that she had added on here, and why I say it's a really smart design, is there's a snap in the middle. So what you can do is actually snap half of the sleeping bag back, and then you have sort of an open type sleeping bag inside. The sleeping bag also, like I mentioned earlier, is the most compressible, so it actually has some loft to it, which makes it like a normal human sleeping bag, unlike some of the sleeping bags that we went over earlier. So this one is definitely very thoughtfully designed and something that I definitely would consider taking out on trail, which I will be testing this spring into this summer. What's really nice about Whyld River is that they have over 5 different sizes for your dog. And so there's a sizing chart online if you go, and Remy ended up getting the medium, which was really amazing because I actually thought it was big for a medium. So the sizing is great because if you have an extra small dog or if you have a really large dog, she'll be able to accommodate the size. There is only the one color so far, which is more of this teal blue with the black trim. And the sizing for the medium is 38 by 28. So I try to also get comparable sizes across all of these sleeping bags. This sleeping bag is also made in China, but did not have the same smell that the Wilderdog sleeping bag did. And it comes in at $109, which for me, if I think about that this is a small cottage vendor, the size that they offer, the compressibility, and the fact that the Ruffwear medium was also around $100, this is only $10 more. I would definitely be willing to pay more for a small cottage vendor, a startup, and someone who has thoughtfully designed this type of sleeping bag to go backpacking with your dog. Whyld River also donates money for each purchase to local charities around the Portland area, which is nice to know that your money does get spent into these local charities within the area. The total weight of the sleeping bag with the sleeping pad and the stuff sack comes in at 1 pound and 10 ounces for the medium. So it's still very lightweight amongst all three, has the most functionality, and we'll see how it does out in the field when I test it this spring. So from a packability standpoint, I thought the Ruffwear Highlands Sleeping Bag was outstanding in this aspect. It was easy to roll up and stuff into its own stuff sack. And the fact that the stuff sack is also a compression sack makes it even more useful to have, especially if you're trying to get it into your own bag versus your dog's pack. This bag also fits into Remy's pack, which is the Mountain Smith K9 pack size medium, which is really key for me to be able to fit that bulky piece, but lightweight piece into his own pack. The Wilderdog Sleeping Bag, I would say, is packable into its own pack, very easy to roll and stuff into its own stuff sack. But the fact that it's not really compressible, it didn't make it easy to get into Remy's pack. And in fact, I couldn't even fit it into the pack. I also tried to put it into a separate compression sack to see if I could get it to compress down even smaller to get it into his pack, and it still didn't fit. So this one is one where I think it would be a great car camping sleeping bag, and one overall if you're trying to get something that's more universal and a little bit more durable because of that very thick denier outside of the bag, but one where I don't think I would be able to take this one backpacking with me because I can't fit it into Remy's bag. And the Whyld River Sleeping Bag of all three sleeping bags is the most compressible. Actually, when you try to roll it up like the other dog sleeping bags, you can't because the material is so slippery like a normal human sleeping bag that it just slides around everywhere, and it's really hard to roll up and put into the stuff sack. So on the flip side, you actually are able to stuff it into the stuff sack like a normal human sleeping bag to be able to get it in there. The Whyld River Sleeping Bag also fit into Remy's Mountain Smith Canine Pack, size medium, and you can fit this in basically by stuffing it in without the stuff sack, which is the best way. When I've tried to do it with the stuff sack and just slide it in there, it doesn't fit, but it's able to be compressed and be able to stuff into the saddlebags of his pack. I also tried to see if I got a compression sack, if I was able to stuff the Whyld River sleeping bag in a compression sack in his canine pack, but I wasn't able to do it. So what we have here is the Big Agnes Copper Spur HVUL2 that has the tapered end, which is 42 or supposedly 42 inches across this end. You can see the bag actually comes up a little bit around the side. And this is a women's small sleeping bag. So you can just see it's still pretty tight in the Copper Spur. And I tend to have Remy at my feet just because of late night doggy farts I don't want in my face. So we'll go ahead and flip it over to the top side of the tent, which should be 52 inches. So here it is on the top side of the tent, which is 52 inches, but actually measures at 50. And this is also a standard 20-inch sleeping pad. So it definitely fits much better in top side of the tent. And this is the Wilderdog Sleeping Bag in the Big Agnes HVUL2. Definitely a tight fit in the foot part of the tent. And the Wilderdog Sleeping Bag in the top part of the Big Agnes Copper Spur. And here is the Whyld River Sleeping Bag in the bottom portion, 42-inch portion of the Copper Spur HVUL2. And here is the Whyld River Sleeping Bag in the top portion of the Copper Spur HVUL2, which should measure at 52 inches, though it really measures under 50. And here is the Highlands pad in the Nemo Dagger 2P. And this is a rectangular tent, so each end is going to be 50 inches across, and it does measure that way. So definitely plenty of space. And here is the Wilderdog Sleeping Bag in the Nemo Dagger 2P. And here is the Whyld River Sleeping Bag in the Nemo Dagger 2P. And here is the Highlands bag in the REI Half Dome SL2 Plus. And this is also a rectangular tent and measures 56 inches across the bottom. So definitely plenty of room. And here is the Wilderdog Sleeping Bag in the REI Half Dome SL2 Plus. And here is the Whyld River Sleeping Bag in the REI Half Dome SL2 Plus. Okay, so now some of the pros and cons of each of the sleeping bags. We'll start first with the Ruffwear Highlands Sleeping Bag. Some of the pros that I absolutely loved about the sleeping bag, the first being that it is very packable and fits into Remy's sleeping bag. Now just keep in mind this is a medium size, and I did decide to go lower on the size rating just so I could be assured that it would fit into his pack. Now, the only detriment to that is that if you did have to get a large, it probably won't fit into the pack, but it would still have that compressibility and packability. You just have to make sure it fits into your dog's pack. The second thing I really loved about the sleeping bag is that you can tell from the stitching and from the weight of the fabric that it is going to be very durable. And since I've washed it several times and taken it out for the last year and have had no issues with that, I know it's going to be durable in the future. So that's one thing where you can tell it's not cheaply made. And going to one of the cons is that it still is a really pricey sleeping bag for your dog. So cons, price, it is still around $100 without the sleeping pad, which I actually don't recommend getting the sleeping pad with it. But anyways, it is just the sleeping bag. The other thing that I would say is a con, and something that really annoyed me about the sleeping bag is that half zip, or rather the third zip. So what happens, and what Ruffwear didn't account for, is that height of the dog once it's in the sleeping bag. And I'll show you. So basically, the height of the sleeping bag ends up being only about 3 to 4 inches. And if you can imagine, if your dog is trying to get into the sleeping bag and it doesn't open up all the way, I've had to push Remy's little bum into the corner so he can fit inside the sleeping bag, and I can put it around him and zip it up. Now, the moment that he actually moves around, he comes out of the sleeping bag because there isn't enough height for him to actually circle around and readjust himself in the sleeping bag. So that's one of the things where if the zipper extended further, like the Wilderdog sleeping bag, you would actually be able to get into the sleeping bag and drape it over without having to push him or rearrange him inside the sleeping bag. So for me, this is almost a non-functioning sleeping bag. It's just more like a bona fide sleeping pad, which is fine for most of the year. And then I actually have a video where I was camping at about 12 degrees outside, and I ended up putting a blanket over him so he'd have that extra warmth. But for me, for the size of dog that he is, which he's a medium to large size dog, this does not function as a sleeping bag anymore. And then the last thing is, even though it's very durable fabric and supposed to be water resistant with a DWR finish, as you saw in part of the demo with the water, it actually has already lost its DWR finish and I have to put more in. I have to revive the DWR finish on it. So this is really important, especially if you're backpacking or camping in muddy or sandy areas, is to have that finish to be able to easily brush off the mud and the wetness and not have it soak through the sleeping bag and be able to dry out very quickly. And next, the Wilderdog Sleeping Bag. So what I really loved about the sleeping bag is it actually looks like a human sleeping bag with the way it's designed. The number one thing, and because I was so annoyed at the Ruffwear sleeping bag with the zipper, the number one thing that I loved about the sleeping bag is that the zipper goes almost all the way around, so you can fit your dog, no matter the size, in the sleeping bag and zip him into it. And even if you didn't want to zip it all the way, let's just say you zip it a quarter of the way, it still functions as a sleeping bag and can be draped over him or her, and they can move around easily. So I love that about the sleeping bag. And then what's nice is also the denier and the Ripset poly fabric that's on the outside. It seems very, very durable. Again, we had to take it field testing, but it is very thick, very durable, and would seem to hold up to the weather and the elements over time. It didn't really quite have a DWR finish, even though it feels like it should. As you saw in that water demo, it did wet out a little bit, but still beat it up as necessary. Now, some of the cons about this, I think the inside that doesn't have the sort of the silky nylon on it would annoy me over time, just because it seems just like a lint trap, hair trap waiting to happen. And I definitely get annoyed at that over time. But if your dog really likes softness, that is probably not a con for you, but I can see it being a con for me because of Remy's shedding. The other thing is obviously lack of packability, compressibility, and the weight. These are things when I'm considering with backpacking, especially Remy having to carry the weight, or me eventually having to carry the weight, and also the packability into his canine pack. So those are one of the things where I probably wouldn't take this backpacking with me, but definitely a great great sleeping bag for something like car camping, where you don't have to worry about that packability and the compressibility as much. And then the last thing with this, I loved that you did have color choices, but there's also only one size. So if you have a really small dog, it's probably not gonna work, because even the one size is pretty big, even for Remy, and you can saw it was a pretty tight squeeze in some of these 2P10s. And lastly, we have the Whyld River Sleeping Bag, which I thought from a design standpoint was the most functional for backpacking. And you can definitely tell that the founder is a backpacker herself. And so just the thoughtful design into the Whyld River Sleeping Bag is something that I absolutely love. So it is compressible, it is packable, it packs up just like a human sleeping bag, no rolling necessary, you just stuff it into the stuff sack. The other thing I loved about this was, as you saw in that demo, the DWR finish on it is really good. It didn't even soak through or wet through, beat it up and rolled right off when I rolled it onto the floor. The other thing is that this actually has a little bit of loft to it, which makes it feel nice and cozy. I'm sure the dogs would love a nice and cozy sleeping bag. And as I mentioned with the design and the versatility, you can use it just a sleeping pad, you can use it like a sleeping bag, you can use it with the baffles in or like a bolster on the outside, and you can leave the pad at home if you want to lighten up the load a little bit. So there's many ways to be able to use it, very versatile. You know, the number one thing is probably going to be the price, but remember it does come with this extra sleeping pad and you're helping out a small business as well. So it's not that for $10 more than the Ruffwear, and the versatility in sizes is one of those things where I think it's a really good trade-off, because I haven't field tested this, but another thing I would be a little bit worried about over time are going to be these toggles, and if they're going to get caught or if they're just going to rip out over time, especially after washing it. So that'd be my only concern right now with some of the quality of it, but definitely a quality sleeping bag. It does have a little bit thinner of a denier on the outside, so we'll see how that holds up over time and if it's as durable as some of the other sleeping bags on the market. So that's it. Hopefully you found this information helpful, and if you did, please give this video a big thumbs up. And if you have any questions about the sleeping bags, please put it in the comments below. I definitely can answer anything in terms of details and sizing and anything else that you might want to know about these different brands. And consider subscribing to my channel. I talk all about hiking, camping, and backpacking, and just your life adventures with you and your dog. So thanks for watching.